This will be the last PowerPoint lecture for Chapter 6. The title of this PowerPoint is American History, Unit 3, Lecture 4, The War of 1812, and Foreign Affairs. So the War of 1812, James Madison becomes president before the war in 1808. If you remember talking about the War Hawks were people in Congress and citizens that were in favor of going to war with Britain. The reasons or the causes of the War Hawks wanting to go to war with Britain was imprisonment of them capturing our sailors and shipping boats and forcing them into a so-called slavery, making them work for British merchant ships. Also, other causes for going to war. The War Hawks and citizens of the United States were upset with how Great Britain undercover or sneakily armed the Native Americans and tried to take over desired territory in the West. So those were kind of some of the reasons why the War of 1812 actually happened. So, key events of the war. The United States attempts to invade Canada at the time. Canada was under Great Britain's rule. The city of York, which is now the city of Toronto in Canada, was burned by United States forces. The British, in turn, raid and come ashore in the United States, and they actually take over Washington, D.C., and they actually burn the White House in 1814. Okay. First Lady at the time, James Madison's wife, Dolly Madison, was able to save artifacts and relics and pictures from the first few presidents, including a famous painting of the first president, George Washington. Andrew Jackson becomes a war hero during the War of 1812. Andrew Jackson wins decisive victories at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, and then one of the last battles of the War of 1812, the Battle of New Orleans in 1815. The battle actually took place when the war was technically over, but because of poor communication or because the communication was so slow, Andrew Jackson and those British regiments down in Louisiana did not get the memo. Jackson becomes this war hero during the War of 1812. War of 1812 was obviously very quick. It only lasted about 4 years. Not really talked about because nothing really happened after the war, which I'll go into detail here on the next slide. So what happened though with the War of 1812, we see the end of the Federalist Party. There was a meeting called the Hartford Convention where people of the Federalist Party met to discuss opposition to the war. They did not want to go to war. This was the first time that they actually discussed secession or leaving the Union as an option for New England and some of the New England states. But after Jackson's victory at the Battle of New Orleans, people look down upon the Federalist Party like, how dare you be in opposition to this war? It was necessary, and their actual political party dissolves, and this begins an era in the United States called the Era of Good Feelings. The end of the War of 1812, nothing changed hands. There was no loss of territory by Great Britain. The United States didn't gain any new territory. Same thing with Great Britain. Great Britain didn't gain any territory or lose any territory with the war. The war was, I won't say it wasn't uneventful. It was still a war. There was definitely a lot of fighting and killing, but just not on a large scale because it just didn't last very long. So they signed the peace treaty, the Treaty of Ghent. Like I said before, no territory was changed between the two. It kind of reaffirms American independence, whereas not that Great Britain was trying to test us or see what they could take back from us. I guess they were kind of doing that from a standpoint, but the United States establishes themselves as a solid country that wasn't going to be bullied by Great Britain. There are a lot of important things that come out because of the war. One of which was the Star Spangled Banner was written. Um, the author Francis Scott Key of the Star Spangled Banner viewed a bombardment of a fort. This fort was located in Maryland near Baltimore, and it was called Fort McHenry, and it was bombarded or shot up by cannons from British ships that were in the harbor, and the bombs bursting in air and all that good stuff. So he was watching this bombardment happen. Francis Scott Key was, as he was writing the Star Spangled Banner. There was a lot of naval battles that actually took place in the Great Lakes, on Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan. So, there were naval battles that happened there, fighting all throughout the Northeast, and then obviously down in the South around D.C., because D.C. was obviously ransacked. So, one of the lesser wars, but still, still some different interesting history surrounding the War of 1812.